Hey all, welcome to the module on the politics of Congress, module 6A. Things I want to highlight here. Well, one, I want to go backwards in time for just a moment and emphasize, because I don't think I did that in the previous video on civil rights intro, that the mainspring for progress on civil rights in America have been social movements. All right, that's what drives progress on civil rights. Yeah, so if you think about it, right? Why did we end up getting an amendment to the Constitution guaranteeing women the right to vote? The suffrage movement. Why did we get things like the Violence Against Women Act in 1994, I think it was? Right, the second wave of feminism. Why did we get the Voting Rights Act of 65 and the Civil Rights Act of 64? The Black Civil Rights Movement. Yeah. So I wanted to emphasize that. I think it's in the quiz on that module, but I wanted to make sure that I articulated that through more than just a question on a quiz. All right, so there's that. Now we can come back to the politics of Congress. Although it turns out, right, the reason Congress passed major civil rights legislation in 64 and 65 was because, right, of pressure put on them by the Black Civil Rights Movement. Black Civil Rights Movement helped shift public opinion. Public opinion shifted the politics of Congress in a certain direction. All right. That's one thing to keep in mind. However imperfectly, the U.S. Congress does respond, broadly speaking, to shifting public opinion. Sometimes that's in a more liberal and progressive direction. Sometimes it's in a more conservative or reactionary direction. Other things I wanted to say about Congress. Right now, right, the array of power is thus: the Democrats control the U.S. Senate. I think it's 51-49, I believe, maybe 52-48. And the Republicans control the House by about 4 seats. So we are at razor-thin margins in both houses. Republicans control the House, barely. Democrats control the Senate, barely. So that's interesting and significant, right? It kind of limits what either side can do. And currently, right, Republicans in the House are in a blocking role for the most part, trying to block things by Democrats, whether you're talking about Joe Biden in the White House or Democrats controlling the U.S. Senate. Other things to note here about Congress. Gerrymandering is a big deal in terms of which side wins the most seats in any election cycle. And the Supreme Court has held, right, just recently, I think it was maybe a current events article, that the Voting Rights Act is still in effect. And under certain conditions, state legislatures do need to draw at least some majority-minority electoral districts. Right, so I'll be blunt. That's going to help Democrats in 2024. Alabama, right, no matter how much they hate to do it, they're going to have to draw a black majority electoral district in addition to the one they already have for 2024. I think Louisiana, the same. All right, this is going to apply in cases where Republicans control. Right, but there are islands of minority populations, typically, of course, Democrats. So this is clearly an electoral advantage for Democrats. That the Voting Rights Act, in terms of gerrymandering, is still in effect, and it'll be a bit of a problem for Republicans. All right. Now that being said, looking ahead to 2024, if I had to call it from here, I think Republicans have a good chance in 2024 of winning back the Senate. Not because they're super popular. They're no more popular than the Democrats are, i.e. not very. It's not because they have fabulous candidates running. I think a lot of casual observers of American politics like to make everything personal. Sometimes it's not personal, it's only business. It's structural in this case. So, right, we know that a senator's term in office is 6 years. And about 1/3 of those senators come up for re-election every 2 years. And so it just turns out that the array of seats coming open in 2024 for re-election, a remarkably large number are, number one, Democrats seeking re-election, and number two, Democrats in red states. So Democrats have their work cut out for them. Even if they have a good cycle, which I think they probably will, they're going to struggle to hold the Senate just because luck of the draw. Look, the cycle in 2026 will be more favorable to Democrats structurally, but 2024 is an uphill climb for Democrats, and it's not personal at all. It's just structural. People often don't like to hear that. Sorry. Francis ruins everything. The other thing is the House. I'd be shocked, honestly, if Democrats didn't win back the House. Abortion continues to be a major issue, and it is not redounding to the benefit of Republicans. It's clearly going the other direction. That whatever the Supreme Court thought it was accomplishing in the Dobbs decision, overturning Roe v. Wade, whatever the pro-life movement thought they were accomplishing there, right, there's been a lot of blowback and backlash, and it's the law of unintended consequences. Right, so it's put a lot of Republicans in a vulnerable position because it turns out, right, more than 60% of Americans would like to go back to where we were before the Dobbs decision. Not unrestricted access to abortion, but relatively broad access to abortion. But right, in a lot of red states, the legislature says, "The heck with public opinion." We need to take care of the base, right? And the base of the Republican Party wants to criminalize all abortions, or nearly all abortions. So I think that will continue to hurt Republicans in 2024 and for the foreseeable future, quite honestly. What is it Oscar Wilde said? Be careful what you wish for, you might get it. Right? So Republicans who pined for the Dobbs decision, I think they have some regrets. And they're struggling right now, right, with how to handle this for 2024. They know it's a losing issue for Republicans. And they're trying to figure out, how do we handle that? Number one, de-emphasize it. Right? Talk about transgender, issues. Talk about crime. Talk about education. Right? Cultural war issues where Republicans have some advantages right now. Don't talk about abortion is what the National Party is telling candidates. Talk about it as little as possible. And don't advocate for a harsh national ban. At most, say, leave it up to the states. So that's been fun to watch. Other things I might say about the politics of Congress. It is the institution that we love to hate. As unpopular as Biden is now, and he's pretty unpopular, Congress is less popular. The Supreme Court these days, not very popular. They're pretty far out of step with most Americans, far more conservative, right? More popular than Congress. Typically these days, if you ask people that generic classic question, do you approve of the job that Congress is doing? You get around maybe 15 or 20%. And I postulate on some possible reasons for that in those narrated slides. All right. I talked more than I should have. The other thing to note, I would say that for those who are concerned about this descriptive representation or demographic representation, which I think is important, arguably in a democracy, our governmental bodies of elected representatives should look something like the rest of America. Congress is moving in the right direction, so to speak. Right? It's becoming ever more diverse with each passing election cycle. There's still some work to do, especially in the Senate. And we talked about that, right? It can be hard for minorities to win or have power statewide because in so few states, I think maybe only Hawaii, are minorities in the majority. Because even in like California, right? Whites are no longer in the majority, but they're the single largest racial and ethnic group by far. Maybe not by far, but by still a decent margin. Same here in Nevada. So it's still very challenging for minorities to win statewide races. That's why the Senate tends to be less diverse. The House, right, you're talking about electoral districts that are smaller than a statewide population. more likely that minorities can elect a candidate of their choice in those smaller districts. Hence the House, right, being more diverse. All right.